Beautiful divine masculine and feminine darlings. This is the Seraphim Gypsy, SeraFae Indigo Empress, and Shiloh Horizon. I don't plan to be here for too terribly long, but I do have a little reading. Excuse me, maybe a reading. A little channel to share, more specifically, a breakdown of some destiny paths. This is a continuance of the previous live feed. The first one was in regards to my own, as well as breaking down a karmic males. This one in particular is about karmic female energies that have come up causing problems. 111. First and foremost, right, this is in regards to that plagiarism energy from this past week. Those on this path must learn to be more grounded, operate from a core of strength, and deal resolutely with their emotions, as well as deal with their egos. They don't often have a clear understanding of who they are to begin with, and so it is easy for them to confuse their own feelings or personality traits with those of others. This seems to be somebody with a personality disorder, 222. They are people pleasers, but also have a fear of rejection. So it is common for them to become what others need them to be, meaning they will try to fake and present themselves in a way that they think someone will like them for, which actually sounds like narcissistic mirroring to me, meaning this is somebody who will mirror the traits of someone that they're trying to get the affection or attention of. They might not actually be like they're trying to present themselves to be at all. In fact, they're not. But they're trying to copy you because they want you to feel like you must have things in common, when really they're just mirroring back to you what they've observed from you. I've seen narcissists do that to people to convince people that the narc has more in common. Like, let's break it down this way. There was a karmic or a fallen masculine, or was a divine masculine who is now fallen, which means he's karmic. But he was a divine masculine, and he had the choice between a divine feminine or a karmic. And the karmic energy, in some cases, will try to present themselves as divine feminine, or she will try to mirror him back to him so that he thinks that the karmic female is more like him and vice versa than divine feminine, when actually she's not like him at all. In fact, she's not like divine feminine at all. If anything, she's toxic and manipulative, which is why he was able to fall for that, because, well, in this case, he fell. He's been that too, right? So he had a choice to elevate towards a divine feminine energy, or he had the choice to go into a karmic space. However, this is a situation where this person tried to convince him that his own energies being projected back to him, toxic or otherwise, were the best fit for him. And he ruined his life when he chose that, but he also chose that, so it's not just on her. Anyway. chameleon-like. They try to adapt themselves to that of anyone they spend time with, much time with, or watch a lot. In other words, stalk. This path will force those born on it to come to some conclusions about who they are, how they interact with others, and who exactly they want to be. There's a reference of emotional energy vampirism here. Like the previous life path that I broke down earlier, it was about a karmic male. It said that if he didn't learn his lessons, he was going to flounder, or if he surrounded himself with toxic people as he has been, he was going to continue to flounder. He was surrounding himself with yes men, henchmen, people who were toxic like him, so they weren't calling him out on his toxicities because they share them. They all share the same toxicity and addictions. And by surrounding yourself with people who don't encourage you to grow but enable your bad habits, that's how he flounders. He just never grows. He stays in a toxic constant cycle. And this particular path says there's a reference of a similar energy, meaning that until they learn to stop creating drama and over emotionality, they're going to flounder. 802. They needed to learn, they're supposed to learn how to stay in balance both emotionally and psychologically. It says it's also important for these people not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the whole concept of the plagiarizing energy, some of these people quit their day jobs that were working for them to try to copy our life paths, our businesses, our destiny paths, light workers full time. So they were in such a rush to throw the bath water out, they forgot that they didn't take the baby out of it. Like, why would you have bath water to throw out? Because you gave the baby a bath. But don't be in such a rush to get rid of the bath water that you forget to take the baby out first. And they did, you see. They threw out these successful aspects of their careers because they were jealous of someone else's, and that, my darlings, was not the way to be. Hi, baby Katie. I love you. But they tried it anyway. And then fumbled. Another reference is that they're not supposed to try to exercise their self-perceived gift of feeling. So these are people who think they're intuitive, okay? But on the understanding from the outside looking in, it's coming from a space of delusion. And so in this case, let's say somebody with this particular destiny path and a birthday of February 7th, 1992. This is somebody who may claim to be intuitive, and they're not. Claiming that they can feel out situations, but you see this is a person who's confused by energies and emotions, not knowing what's theirs and what's not, so they project themselves onto others, and then they try to copy and steal other people's essence, aspects, personality, attributes, and traits for themselves, and then gaslight themselves into thinking that they were the originator of them. 1111 on the timer. For starters. But then they shut down and they get cold, especially when called out, 1122, and this says repression of emotion is not the goal. But that's the only way that they could be so cutthroat. Which they weren't supposed to be doing anyway, so you see they failed on both fronts, in both accords, in both arenas. They were supposed to establish a self-identity, not try to doppelgang or usurp someone else's. They are supposed to take accountability for their own feelings and be honest about them. Their background is often such that emotional blackmail or manipulation is second nature to them. So this is somebody that probably for their whole life, or at least a good portion of it, has learned to mentally or emotionally manipulate and gaslight people to get what they want. Seems like a personality disordered person to me. This seems like a cluster B personality disordered person to me. What falls in those categories? Borderline personality, histrionic personality, narcissistic personality, a whole bunch of them do. Those are a few. These people also tend to seek out people who will nurture them, especially in a motherly fashion. But you see, then they try to step on those same people and claim that they are qualified to be them. Divine Masculine says, she's not qualified, she's not even a mother. No. I mean, it's not even like she has, that's right, it's not even like she has nurturing or motherly qualities. Look at how she handled this situation. That wasn't very maternal or, frankly, divine feminine of her. No, it wasn't. I agree. And when divine masculine alone can recognize that, boo-boo, you've done goofed. 1322. This is somebody who's tuned in, though, at least on that degree, is able to notice or pick that up. And so this is on the flip side, right? So somebody who sought out some kind of maternal figure, right? Like, say somebody who reaches out to or comes in contact with a divine feminine and becomes a client of a divine feminine, a real mother at that, but also divine feminine mother. So they seek out people who will nurture them in a motherly fashion. Often subconsciously they mother others out of a feeling that they'll be mothered in return. So then, because they want that feeling for themselves, they try to copy and step on and usurp all of that divine feminine's personality traits and then project them outward at other people. Yeah, divine masculine says, oh, okay, so you're saying she stumbled across divine feminine, liked what she felt and saw, decided to become her, and then pretended to be her to the public for money that should have been going in your pocket the whole time, legally speaking, based on copyright authority and law, for starters, as well as trademark violations, I'm hearing. That is correct. He thinks it's shameful, that she should be ashamed of herself. He's also saying more, but I'm going to be quiet about that for now. It's none of anybody else's business. So they're saying that this is a pattern that must be dealt with ruthlessly. Now, these people on the toxic side, they end up becoming ruthless, that cutthroat energy to cut people down and steal to get what they want. Very impulsive, immature, and ungrounded. But because they are failing to acknowledge those patterns, the emotional blackmail, the whole mothering, doppelganging, and then false projection, an attempt for personal gain, or a sense of self-balance, or control, or worth in some cases. 1622. Divine Masculine says she can't even help herself. How is she supposed to help other people? Right. He says she can't even regulate herself. No. Look at how she came for you. Obviously she can't regulate herself. No. Look at how she came for you and you've been still able to regulate yourself. Yep. He says, good job, and I'm being called to just be quiet on that topic for now. After that, he said more, but it's none of anybody else's business. Certainly the Karmics, and more specifically I say that because there are cross-watchers that don't belong here, but heads up. It's all good. I come here for the love. Came here for love. Someone to hold me down. I want you to reach out. 17, 17, 17, 22. And so because they fail to ruthlessly check themselves on these toxic patterns, they end up being ruthless towards other people, trying to convince us that they're correct when they're not. This, as a result, often leads to disappointment and anger when their own needs are not met. Developing the ability to recognize this is crucial. Clear boundaries. Not simply having clear boundaries, respecting others, which they fail to do when in a state of delusion, for starters. Selfishness, if not delusion, arrogance. It says, may they never become so ruthless that they strive to rise to the top of the corporate ladder. Like you see, that's exactly what she did. 322, 1922. 322 on the clock here on the East Coast, 1922 on the timer. Their judgment is clouded by their emotions, though. Since these people tend to be ruled by emotion and they're codependent, they have to make disastrous choices. Helen Keller was one of these, but in this case, this is a reference of these people being blind. They are speaking gobbledygook. I hear nonsense. There's a word I heard in another reading the other day, gobbledygook. That popped up in the title, I believe. She was blind, and so in this reference, this is a person who couldn't see things very clearly, this karmic energy, and deaf, meaning she didn't want to listen, right? Good advice fell on deaf ears with her. And I'm not talking about Helen Keller, but I am cross-referencing the energy between her and a karmic who had hearing just fine. Maybe she needed glasses, but she could still see, unlike Helen Keller, and she had enough capability to speak and use words, and she chose to do none of those things, not listen. She chose not to see things clearly, and then she also chose to use her mouth to run her gums about nonsense instead of using her ears to listen and learn. For starters. But let's see, shall we, just for giggles? We have this particular birth week of this person was February 7th. Here we go. February 7th. These people need to overcome their need for acceptance and their need for personal recognition before they can claim the higher prizes offered by life. So the way that this karmic decided to plagiarize content from a real divine feminine because she wanted the title but didn't actually have the skill set or do the work to claim it, it's outlining this here. February 7th, birthday 1992. They need to overcome their need for acceptance and personal recognition. They cannot try to claim these higher prizes because they are not equipped to reach them. They're not qualified. And so the chameleon tendencies or references, they're supposed to stop being manipulative and trying to fit in to get what they want or people please or be fake, for starters, is basically what it breaks down to for the most part. Establishing a strong sense of ethics is also important. Somebody that's able and willing and comfortable stealing from others and plagiarizing and not being anything authentic within their own self has no ethics. That's unethical, especially when you're violating copyright law and infringement. You know, it's reminding me of that toxic Taurus energy from earlier, 2422 rather, because it says they need to free themselves from their dependence rather on other people's applause. And that karmic Taurus energy was karmic male energy. His reference was not to surround himself with those types of people who, yes men, henchmen. This is somebody who will push away people who encourage them to stop being toxic or grow, and they'll surround themselves with people who enable them and also are in those same toxic energies, because why would those people check them on their crap if they're all doing it together? They wouldn't, more than likely. Unless they're hypocritical. And often some of those people are, but when they have a mutual goal of targeting someone or there's something in it for them, they put that part in the back burner until it's not convenient for them to ally with those people, and then they start stabbing each other in the back. It's called a blue falcon. 2522. So there was that. Then you had a toxic karmic Cancerian energy. Okay? Karmic female. And she tends to feel overwhelmed when called to make a decision and is daunted by large amounts of information. Taking their heads outside of the clouds, which also you see the previous karmic female had issues with, 2622, both touching on water sign energy and fire sign energy. Both having some kind of either personal association in their chart or tie to a karmic with those things in their chart, both having earth sign either in their chart or ties to an earth sign they were bullying people with. Right? The previous energy had the previous karmic female had earth sign in that chart of hers. This particular one may also as well, actually. In fact, does in one space, but this one also has a direct tie to a actual karmic earth sign outside of her. Taking their heads outside of the clouds, paying attention to what is in front of their noses, and refusing to be carried away by metaphysical impulses will help those on this path to deal with and enjoy the tasks of everyday life. And so this is somebody who got lost in the sauce of spell work and thought that spell work was the way to get what they wanted in life and was their way to shortcut their way. And there's a spell for everything, they thought, for starters. Joined a cult also to get what they wanted and escape reality. Delusional, for starters. Participating in the most mundane life experiences is where their focus should have been, instead of trying to play with spell work and spirituality, for starters. These individuals find it difficult to be wholly present in the now, or even in their own bodies. Also, by the way, they're sick of your crap, karmics. As far as that last karmic female goes, her pitfalls to overcome are being overly structured, so rigid and forced and, well, cold, and also ruthless and miserly, miserable, just wanting other people to suffer because she's unhappy with herself and her own life. So back to this Cancerian energy, birth date, July 21st, 79? I think 79. If I'm wrong, I'll put it in the down bar. These individuals find it difficult to be wholly present in the now or even in their own bodies. And so this is why they were trying to bully other people, right? They're not comfortable in their own bodies, so they were trying to bully light workers into levels of trauma dissociation. They suffer from the harsh realities of life and misfortunes. Escapism runs rampant here as those on this path try to avoid dealing with sorrows, so they don't want to face reality. self-indulgent outlets such as sensual pleasure, otherwise known as sex and promiscuity, or even mind-altering substances, otherwise known as drug addictions, and risk developing dangerous dependencies. Those on this path may idealize romantic love or abandon themselves entirely in a relationship, attempting to merge with their love object only to be disappointed once the blinders of new love come off and they discover the horrid reality and sheer humanness of their loved one, especially if that person that this person was with chose to, just like this one does, present themselves as something or someone that they are not. And so in this case, this toxic Taurus male presented himself to be some kind of knight in shining armor or kingly hero, and this karmic female tried to present herself as some kind of divine feminine, except for they both manipulated each other. For starters, and they thought that they had the one up on each other too. Thus, they often move from one person to another, forever searching for the unattainable. So they're never happy, and they constantly just flit from situation to situation, hoping to find happiness that never comes. It's not found on the outside. Not like that. Karmic female says, yes, it is. And she's thinking about sex and distractions of her own ugly thoughts by another person or drugs or something like that. But the reality is, no, it doesn't. Which is why at the end of it, and you come down from the high, you want more again. Money does not buy happiness. The drugs don't make you happy. That's a temporary attempt to gaslight your brain, but that's not real. Yes, it is. Okay. We don't argue with delusional people here. Moving on. Yeah. Well, she must think I'm right. She's not arguing. No, baby. Self-care is not arguing with idiots. Next. I'm not an idiot. Well, I wouldn't take your advice. So I certainly wouldn't take an insult from someone I wouldn't take advice from. Moving on. That was dumb. 3222. Speaking of, the people on this path may be some of the most impractical people in the personology system. And rarely do they think logically, precisely. That was dumb. Thanks for proving my point. 3344. I heard that. It doesn't say that. Hold on, I gotta move this out of the way. Not a problem. Since you wanted to be ridiculous. Thank you. here's that. Okay. My cat scratched the book a little bit. You see that? I'm not making it up. It's right there. You're delusional. Karmic female? Okay. All right, then. Now that that's been appropriately addressed and established, moving on. Okay. They may not discern what is important or be able to pick out the details or facts that may enable them to draw conclusions, which is why she just stupidly thought it was a grand idea to argue with me again. Making decisions is torture for them, again. Their minds are so adrift that they often prefer to completely ignore anything having to do with the day-to-day practicalities, including taking care of their health. Often they are out of touch with their bodies, so in other words, I have been picking up that this person is a dirty bee and she needs to take a bath and brush her teeth for starters. Something of the sort. Her hygiene's off. Also her pH balance. And everything else. They may be prone to exhibit emotional distress in physical ways. These are people who need to figure out a way to deal with the world and learn how to make decisions, especially better ones. Simple and practical things, and practical skills such as putting things in order are foreign to these people. They need to establish better emotional boundaries between themselves and others, meaning that they need to learn to respect other people's boundaries. There's also a mention of sensory overload here. It's like they don't know when to mind their own business, or they, like the previous energy, get confused with whose energy is whose. They start trying to internalize other people's energy or personalities as their own, while they try to project their own shortcomings or the things that they do not like about themselves onto those that they have been targeting, or have developed some degree of a fixation for, or something. They need to have some structure injected back or into their lives, really, in the first place, and they need to get a better grip on reality, verbatim. Just like the Taurus karmic male, there's a reference of writing in particular, and using writing as an inspiration or a way to try to craft an alternate reality. And now, in this case, this is somebody who is willing to sit in front of a judge and put their hand up under oath and swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help them God, and then lie under oath to a judge. 3922, and make up a whole story about how they're the victim in a story that they created where they're not actually the victim, but really in real life they're the perpetrator, so that they can try to villainize the person that they were victimizing and targeting and putting in survival mode, for starters, or helping other people do exactly those things too. So they're both liars. They're very confident writing or speaking those lies to get what they wanted, a manufactured outcome, but that's also one of the pitfalls they're not supposed to do on their particular paths, and they did them anyway. They went dark. They chose the dark side. Some on this path may go overboard, becoming so highly structured that they become rigid in their need for routine. And so they were so rigid and forceful in this that they decided to insert themselves in the lives of, let's say, Divine Feminine and their children, who, yes, have a healthy structure and routine, but also heal and live comfortably going with the flow. So these people forced their way into our lives and then were so rigid by trying to force their way in our lives and force us to follow their lives and their routine and what they wanted, that they destabilized ours. They were so unstable that they were rigidly destabilizing other people's in order to try to stabilize themselves or keep themselves stable. They probably would have had a better means of doing that if they just left people alone and minded their own business. But they tried to control us too, in order to try to make themselves feel like they were more control of themselves and their lives, and that wasn't it. Okay, some on this path may go overboard, becoming so highly structured that they become rigid in their need for routine. In fact, as dependency-oriented as they are, those on this path must take care not only to become overly dependent on the structures that they have erected, those on this path must take care not to become overly dependent on the structures they have erected. So they created what they thought was going to work for their life, and then they tried to force their way into our lives and then force us to follow their lives. But you see, they destabilized our routines with their rigidity and trying to force ours into theirs when they could have just minded their business. Organizing their lives too severely, they may cut themselves off from the creativity of random occurrence, epiphanies, and other serendipities that can initiate real change. And you see, they did. By trying to target a psychic medium, destabilizing her routine, and then trying to bully her out of being able to go with the flow, as if that was going to make their lives any kind of balanced or any more balanced. It did the opposite. It's just that they dragged us into their instability instead of minding their business and stabilizing themselves. July 21st, 1979. Another problem may be that they use their newly developed analytical skills, which we already established were not very logical or functional or routinely rational or helpful. 4322, quite the opposite, in fact. They may use these newly developed skills, analytical skills, to become too fault-finding or pessimistic, and that's precisely what they did. That's precisely what they did. Because of their yearning, hi baby, come here, for a more beautiful way of life, both for themselves and for others, those on this path often only see the negatives of the world and in others, which is wild. Because what they did was destroy the beauty in others, in women and children that they were jealous of and trying to control because they felt out of control. They tried to control us because they felt out of control of themselves. And instead of gaining control over themselves or us, they destabilized all of us. And then got mad at us when we pulled further away from them to restabilize ourselves, like they should have done and minded their own business to do in the first place for their own lives, instead of trying to insert themselves into ours and then force us to live their toxic routines. Doesn't work. Too rigid. Doesn't work for them either. If it did, they wouldn't be doing this or in this trouble. It was very immature. So the path in this reference brings to mind a reference of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Isis, among other things, ruled the practical arts of spinning, weaving, grinding, healing, functioning as an earth goddess, presiding over hearth and home. But you see, the thing about this is the energy that they targeted, this divine feminine energy. In my case, this would be me. This karmic female does not embody Isis. She was jealous of Isis, wanted to compete with and copy Isis. But this was Nephthys. She's not in every story. Most of the stories of Isis and Osiris, it's Isis and Osiris, and then there's Set, okay? Usually they're triplets. And it's that Isis and Osiris were counterparts, but Set was not one of the counterparts, and he was jealous of Osiris because he wanted Isis for himself. Remember, this was in an era where they did not understand about biology, and they married within their own realms and kingdoms because they did not want an outside kingdom to come in and overthrow the country. Now we know better, but that's what they were doing then. So here we go. As far as this goes, in some narratives, there's a fourth twin, so a quadruplet. And so you had Isis and Osiris, and then you had Set and Nephthys. Set is the Egyptian variation of the devil. Even in regards to the resurrection story, Osiris can be likened very much to Jesus in this note. And even Isis to Mother Mary. But nonetheless, some stories reference Nephthys. Nephthys was the karmic female. Set was the karmic male. Nephthys was like the female devil. Set was the male version of the devil. Isis and Osiris were like the angels of the two of them, of the four of them. But in the story that Nephthys is in, she was so jealous of Isis that she wanted Osiris for herself. So she drugged him and then tried to get herself pregnant by Osiris, right? Trying to trick him into thinking while he was under the influence that she was Isis. She dressed up as Isis and got him all drugged up, spiked his wine or something, and then tried to make him think that she was her sister Isis so that she could sleep with Osiris. And according to the narratives, that's how Horus was conceived. Horus was adopted by Isis, Anubis was conceived. Anubis was adopted by Isis, but he was not Isis's genetically. He still chose Isis. He chose Isis. She drugged and sexually assaulted another woman's husband to get knocked up and have a baby, and that baby still chose Isis. All right. But she was jealous. Set went about to try to kill Osiris out of jealousy. Nephthys went about trying to take her place. Really, Set was trying to take Osiris's place. He was jealous of Osiris because Osiris was given the oasis land. His father knew that he would continue to allow the kingdom to flourish, but Set was a destroyer. So he knew that if he gave Set the oasis land, he would destroy the kingdom and everyone in it would die. So he couldn't do that. He gave it to the green thumb. He gave it to Osiris. And he gave Set governance over the desert land, which really he couldn't destroy because it was already scorched, right? It was right up his alley, but he wanted what he couldn't have. He wanted what wasn't for him. He wanted what his brother Osiris had. And so he tried to murder Osiris. He also wanted Isis for himself. He didn't want Nephthys. So as far as the birth week goes, you have July 21st, so 97. This is somebody who allows inner conflicts to get the best of them. It's also why they try to create conflicts for others, I'd say. They also have a tendency to create their own sense of crisis or emergency, including their issues with the identity crisis thing, copycat. Instability, dysregulation, lack of balance or empathy, for starters. And also this is saying that they really were supposed to learn how to regulate their emotions, attend to the details of things, including not misjudging other people, because they're able to observe themselves and the situation clearly, which they didn't. They did the opposite. And also avoid their addictive side, but they didn't do that either. Quite the opposite, in fact. 51-15. But then I have one more thing for you. Okay? This, my darlings, is in relation to a karmic couple. This is a karmic couple. One of them who has a birthday between April 19th and April 24th. The other that has a birthday between July 19th and July 25th. So let's say, for giggles, this would be 21st and July 21st. The Aries Taurus, so karmic male, and Cancer Leo cusps, so karmic female, are not expected to get along. Oh, and guess what? They didn't. Married for clout, and it didn't work out. Indeed, conflict can be a hallmark, staple of this relationship. This requires time and energy, and of course, harder investments. For the relationship, if it were to have worked out. But it didn't, because it's toxic. Weaknesses, unsympathetic, uncommunicative, unrealistic. Cancer Leo has a hankering after instability and danger. They tend to find romance with unpredictable and impulsive types who mirror their own manic side. And I did mention that. They met each other's own personal brand of crazy. They thought that they were tricking each other. They thought that they were... He thought he was manipulating her and roping her in. And she thought she was doing it to him. Turns out they were both trapping each other. Toxic. Somebody says, why would they do that? Because he had done it to a divine feminine before, and I'm sure she'd played the game with other people before too. And so he was younger than her, and she thought that she was smarter and could manipulate him, and he thought he was manipulating her the way he'd manipulated divine feminine, and they both were playing the game on each other from their own angles. Clearly. Based on that observation and what's in front of me right now. This is a situationship that they think will come much closer to what they really need, but will unfortunately fall short of what they think that they want. They're likely to find one partner is likely to find the other unsympathetic and uncommunicative, especially as marriage partners. The other is often prone to growing impatient in turn, with their spouse's need for variety and excitement, or they're both on the toxic wave together. And so that's just as bad, if not worse. And regardless, they may even regard it as a personal affront. Both of these partners may hang on to the relationship long after it's failed, or a relationship long after it has failed. One of them, however, is more likely to seek solace or distraction outside the marriage through involvements with more unstable types, further destabilizing the relationship and themselves. These people are both, especially when it comes to children, as far as being parents goes, these people are not good parents. Any children that these people are exposing themselves to are apt to find them moody, showing mood swings, and having a lack of balance between active and passive roles. Meaning, trying to pretend to be a parent and then actually not being a parent because they were just pretending. It's very toxic and destabilizing. And they try to play house for show. It hurts people, especially children. Really anybody, especially domestic abuse victims. Their advice is to admit failure or defeat. To be more sympathetic, but also be realistic. They're being told to stop being delusional and insensitive. And also trying to bully their way to the end of things. Admit that you were wrong. Admit that you messed up and send hostages home, for starters. That's your advice. Opening lines of communication. Right, stop trying to gatekeep the truth and just be honest. You don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. That's the message. They don't have a choice. If they don't confess what they've done, the evidence is going to speak for them, and it doesn't matter whether they admit it or not. They're going to have the whole book thrown at them, and because they were willing to make victims suffer for as long as they possibly could, just hoping that they would never get justice, they're going to max out their sentences. Bet 58:22. I don't have to bet. That's prophecy. And you don't have to bet when you've got the divine on your side. Bank on it. In fact. Indubitably. So there's that. I'm going to drop the mic on that right now. I do have some other stuff for you. 4:02 here on the clock on the East Coast. I'll be back at some point with some energy clearing. In the meantime, I've got some projects to finish, and I'll catch you on the next one. Blessings. Namaste. Toodles.